I'm really hopeful with this new or renewed effort around modernization that it's the focus on the customer that will get the funding that we've needed. There's a reason for 20, 30, 40 years we have these these legacy systems, because it's not sexy or cool to invest in M&O of a mainframe system, but we've neglected them so long that we are at the place of saying, if we don't, and here's how we can focus on that customer experience to also make the necessary adjustments and investments that we need to. Great. Just time check. So we have about 20 minutes. We'll leave about 5 minutes at the end for folks to ask questions too. Or if you have questions in between, please don't be shy. So George, this one, I'm going to have you start with this one. But modernization efforts are often large and gnarly, spanning multiple years and often multiple agencies. What is your superpower for maintaining momentum during tumultuous times? And what are some of the key lessons learned you've taken from how to sustain long-term focus on large-scale efforts?
So superpower is a subjective term.
Absolutely.
Right? So what I feel is a superpower and is appreciated by some people is not necessarily appreciated by others. My boss notably. I think being calm and steady with transparency, regardless of how stressful the situation is, because my perspective of stress is considerably different than what my boss's, perspective of stress is. And, I don't go home at night sleepless, or I don't remain sleepless tonight about this. This is a problem that will be there the next day, and I will, drive on with whatever it is. But there's, these kinds of efforts. This is often the first time that a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders have ever experienced a large scale effort to change business processes and technology. And it's a lift and shift of their paradigm on how to deal with their customers. And it's stressful for them. I mean, the people bouncing off the walls, wondering if this is going to work. And it's like, you really got to calm down and just relax just a little bit, because one, this, your health you're talking about here. So let's keep it in perspective and not get too stressed out about it. If something goes wrong, we'll assess the situation, we'll deal with it, and we'll find the solution and move on. And so that calm and steady piece of it, I feel, has helped keep the ship in the right direction, so to speak, and making sure that people don't jump off the proverbial edge just because of the momentous change that's occurring. Even if there's a situation that is dire, like the production server being affected when it shouldn't be even involved in this particular effort, that's not something that I need to convey to my stakeholders. They need to know if there's a problem. They need to know the so what. What does it mean? How are we going to fix it? What's the time frame to get it fixed? And as long as you can deliver that information in a calm and steady way, and then not hide it either, the business lines generally appreciate that. And as long as they believe that you're going to assess and deal with the situation in a effective way, and then show them what the result of that is. And then as far as the second part of that question, which is what the lessons learned, biggest lesson for me, small wins. The small wins add up. So I don't need some watershed moment to tell everybody and shout from the rooftops, look what we just did. No, I don't need that. What I need is, yes, we have accomplished this whole thing. What's next? And celebrate those small wins. The team needs to feel confident in the things that they're doing. And I think it's worked. We've come a very long way over the last several years in moving this project forward. And I think those small wins have added up to the point where the bulk of the stakeholders are very confident about what's going to happen here in just about a week and a half. That there's not a lot of worry. And I think that's the summation of all these small things that we have done. So that's the biggest lesson for me.
Well, it gets solutions out to the clients or those that we serve quicker as well. So it's a small win for the team. It's a small win for those that we serve, and a small win for the authorizing environment that wants
Absolutely.
to see value for the dollars that they're provisoing. So. Lacey, how about you? What's your superpower for leading during these tumultuous times?
Yeah, this is a great question. I love it, by the way. I think some of the work that our agency does and that I am involved in outside of the IT construct, helps give some perspective and has garnered experience to help people understand like what really is an emergency. You alluded to this, and what's an urgency, and being that calm voice that creates urgency around continued forward progress towards the why, the vision, the mission, and the goals of the project, but also being pretty pragmatic and real about, people are not dying. There are times when the nature of the work that Department of Health does, decisions are about people's health and well-being. And, most of the time, the decisions we're making about IT systems, even really complex, critical ones, aren't that intense. And you have time and the ability to change your mind or change course if you need to, and help people step back and see the whole system and what what this IT system is part of our broader mission. And we're all going to get there together. So I would say that calmness and that sense of togetherness and perspective. And then lessons learned. I think, being real with people about how long some things take and giving them tools to both see progress. So the small wins, but even just seeing progress, before you even have something, the first release or those sorts of things. And being committed to, staying on the journey with them and helping them see that you're going to stay on the journey with them, even when there are setbacks.
For me, I love this question as well. It's for me, I think the superpower is the recognition that in times, desperate times, or critical times, there's going to be no shortage of people that want to help, and you have to recognize that. And I think my superpower is being able to recognize truly the folks who really believe in our mission and want to help, and finding a way for them to contribute. Because there's no shortage of things to be done. But then how do you maximize their effort at the right time? Because the flip side of that, the dark side of that is, well, everybody wants to help, and then we have a very disorganized effort. But being able to sift through and be able to get everybody's contribution at the right time. I think the lesson learned for me too is that when everyone's jumping in to help, everyone wants to solution immediately, and so taking the pause, getting the team to take the pause, and let's not talk about the solution immediately. Let's just get on the same page in terms of stating the problem, stating the challenge, stating the technology constraints. Let's just get on the same page there first, and then we can solution together. I think that helps us move faster ultimately down the path of a sustainable and agreed upon solution. So that would be the lesson learned, how to manage the shadow side of that strength.
Well, I've seen Lacey and George in action with your calm, steady, pragmatic. I mean, I do think that's what makes you a good, executive sponsor, technical sponsor in that role. And Jason, what you described as being able to pinpoint, somebody's passion or how to corral enthusiasm is definitely a skill as well. And I've seen you mirror that with IE&E. So truly are your superpowers. We'll have one more question for the panel, and then be thinking about if you have any questions for our panelists. But I'm curious, how do you strike a balance between staying the course and adapting when challenges arise? Jason, you want to start us on that one?
Sure. I'll take an anecdote from probably Lacey's world. I think of like a clinician, and a clinician, one challenge is fixation on a particular diagnosis. And we've set this path. We're fixated on this path. We're set on this path. But to me, setting the right balance is having the recognition that there might be a point in the path where this is actually not benefiting us, not benefiting the customer, that we actually have to change course. So both having the ability to step back and look at that, but then also the ability to fight against that confirmation bias that we spent all this time crafting this course. We know this, right? We told the legislature we're going to do this. We told our sponsors we're going to do this. But being able to step back and say, maybe this isn't the right path, or maybe we have to resequence how we're going to do this. So to me, that's where we would strike the balance within IE&E.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought long about this. I wanted to share just a small story, and that is, I'm from a military background, and when I was in Afghanistan, I was a special projects officer for future planning. And I was talking with the colonel. He's a gentleman from Australia, and we were discussing the difference between American planning and essentially the rest of the world planning. And he said, I always found it fascinating to watch Americans plan and then execute. He goes, you guys will go with an 80% solution and then course correct as you move along. And I say, you're absolutely right. We're all about the action. We're all about moving forward and then finding out whether the path we're on is the right one. If it's not, we adjust a little bit to find the right path. Whereas Europeans and others would tend to find a 95% solution and then execute what they feel is an already solid plan with very little correction needed. And it's all about timing and about, we as Americans generally, need that immediate action to validate what we're doing. And so I remember that story in the planning that we do, and I'm all about trying to move something forward as quickly as possible and then course correcting as we go. It's not always the right plan, but it is generally speaking trying to get to someplace because too many people get paralyzed by analysis, right? Paralysis by analysis. And I don't believe in that at all. And I try to prevent my team from doing that. And I try to prevent the business partners that we have from doing the same thing, and months delayed because you can't move forward at all. So I'd rather move forward in some form or fashion. And so those challenges are going to come. It's a given. And I tell my stakeholders all the time, these things happen. There's always going to be a problem. There's always going to be some sort of delay. There's going to be a mistake. Recognize it for what it is. Find a way to mitigate that or correct it, and then accept whatever challenge happened and move forward. And so I try and do that with whatever it is we are doing. And, that's the balance that I find between those. And, the whole point of this is supposed to be agile anyway, right? So what does agile mean? It means being flexible and adaptable. And that's what we're trying to do. And, while there's beauty in checklists and beauty in the waterfall method, you combine the two and you have a process, but then you have the ability to flex on the direction you need to, find the right path.
Yeah, on this one, I think it's both focusing in on your goals and then listening to what the environment is telling you. So, and I mean all senses of environment. And the example that comes to mind for our project, it has been in development for a while, and it was initially conceived as our team called it the Big Bang release. Like, we're going to build the whole thing and launch it all at once. And that is how all of the planning was done and all of the initial work was done. And we just could not get it off the ground, And, there were things that happened in the legislature, and we had great partnership with Bill and Amy, and the universe and the environment around us, our authorizing environment, was telling us that we needed to find a way to break apart this project. And I think probably created so much anxiety among the team for months, thinking through how they might be able to do this. And we ultimately had to rely on a small win. And, we did a very small release as our first release. And, again, willing to take the risk as the executive sponsor, including if it didn't go well. And, people realized like, oh, we are going to figure this out and we are going to get to the finish line. And it changed the whole mentality of the team and the project. And we had been stuck for quite a while. So that was one where, like everything in the environment within the organization with our vendors, with our partners in state government and our legislature. The whole world was telling us that we had to do something different, and figuring out what that is and then determining it yourself. I think that is the other really important lesson learned when you work in state government is sometimes if you don't act or change the course of the way you're acting, it will be done to you. And I just feel so grateful that we got our team to we gave them the space to think really creatively, and they came up with a bunch of options, and we costed them all out, and we completely changed the way the project was conceptualized just a little over a year ago, honestly. And now we're a few months away from our third and final release.
It truly, that transformation that you were talking about saved Helms.
Yeah.
It just for years struggled with this big bang approach, and realizing that it was too big to implement all at once. It needed to be looked at from a more modular, waved approach, and that with Lacey's leadership got the project team and the stakeholders their minds around that phased implementation approach. And I think that's another key to these modernization efforts. It's no longer the years of requirements gathering and long RFP writing, and then you get this big bang solution that takes years to actually implement all at once. It just doesn't happen that way. It's much more incremental, small wins, as the panel discussed. Are there any questions from the panel? Okay, we've got two. So Mario and then Diana.
And I guess I'd like to start by just complimenting you guys for what you're doing. I know for myself at Splunk and with my Cisco partners, it helps us a lot to be able to talk about what you guys are trying to solve. It takes a longer period of time. I know for Kim Horton, she asked me about some things, and it took me about 3 or 4 months to really figure out what worked versus first sending her a bunch of information. But I just wanted to say we appreciate it and see it as a true partnership. And we're hearing what you guys are talking about around cost containment and other things, and trying to figure out how we can do a better job at putting things together to help you guys to solve your solutions. That's really all I wanted to say. But anything you could share on some of these conversations that you guys are having, like I've gone to some of the TSB meetings, and I think it's very interesting that you guys are having these discussions and sharing these best practices. But then how that works with your partners. Someone earlier today spoke about taking some things in, building a concept, sending it down, and letting it come back up to you guys from your teams. What does that look like to you guys?
Like the challenge procurement concept of sort of stating a business problem, putting it out to the vendors to help some of the experts help us to solve the business problems that we have, and then bring it back.
I think that was a beautiful example of, that's just a lot of people aren't, I don't know of another state who's doing it, but I'm sure after Bill talked about it, they are. But I'd like to know more about that. But also, like you talked about, vetting your projects internally and bringing it back up.
Vetting the projects?
I think someone earlier talked about they take a concept, they talk about it on the C-level, and then they send it down to their organization and bring it back up. But that's just one thought around it. I don't know what their thoughts are around it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, most of my thought processes are surround supportability. I'm almost exclusively thinking about, can I support this thing, for long term, no matter how bright and shiny the idea is. So whenever those ideas bubble up, there's lots of ideas from the staff. There's lots of ideas from the other business lines about, hey, I'd like to do this thing, or I saw this on TV, or there's the easy button, I want to press it. Like, well, we have rules. We have rules that we have to follow in the state. And we have rules about the environment in which we can operate in terms of technology. And so it's my job to vet those ideas, as they come forward. And I bounce them off of my subject matter experts, say, can we even do this thing, let alone support it? And then the other part of that, the flip side of it, is for me to tell the truth to the business, which is I always found is one of my primary duties is to tell the stakeholder the truth. No matter how hard it might seem to hear, I'm sorry, we cannot do that. but here's the reason why. Or yes, we can do that. Or perhaps we already have this in our portfolio that can be done, just not in the same way that you think it can be done, because there's a different technologies already available that we can do that. So you have to help them understand what it is they're trying to ask. So I really rely on BAs, my business analysts, to talk to the business lines to help them sort out what it is that they're really asking for. And so there's lots of great ideas out there. Not all of them are feasible. And then when we find those few nuggets, how do we make sure that it's not something that we already possess in our portfolio, or is it technology that we can get, or is there another agency perhaps that's already doing those sorts of things? So definitely we send that back down, we bring it back up, and in a vetted way, and I send it out to the community at large, and perhaps somebody out there has already done something like this, and that's how we get all the information to find the right path, and so to speak. At least that's how I try to approach that.
Great, thanks, George. Okay, Diana's going to close us out.
Well, I'm really enjoying this panel, so thank you all. I had a question about amidst these kind of big changes and building resilience, I think on teams and sometimes among our colleagues, you might encounter the detractors, right? The folks who definitely are pack it in, this can't be done. And worse, I see, oftentimes they can have sort of a dampening effect on other people's motivation. So I'd love to hear from the panel, what strategies have you found to win over those detractors?
I can maybe start. And I can start because some of the licensing boards in Washington State are independent from the Department of Health. So they're both our customers and reliant on the system that we're developing. And then among the people we license, many of them have professional associations, and they're of varying degrees of sophistication and resource. And not only because of the delays, but even because of the history of the legacy system that we have, I would say there have been naysayers, significant naysayers about Helms from the beginning. And when we got stuck, there were plenty of stakeholders in the world and staff within our agency and some of our partners who thought it was time to just give up. I mean, that's maybe a little overstating, but this is never going to happen. It's going to be just like the system we have now. We're not going to really ever finish it. It's not going to meet our needs. What are we doing here? And I think, one, for the folks that are committed, keeping them fed from a value perspective of their work and contribution, but not closing the door on those upset stakeholders. I mean, we absolutely give them lots of care and feeding. And, every time they said they wanted to stop, we explained why we had to switch over, why the system we have now will not meet our needs. It's not even meeting our needs today, much less is it going to meet our needs in the future. And then actually making sure you're listening to what the essence is of their concerns and following up to address those concerns. So showing action that you've heard them and the system will be responsive to their needs. And, it does mean things like figuring out, one of the big concerns is the cost, because the cost of this system is paid for by the licensees themselves. So showing them that you are committed to keeping the cost low, showing them that you are committed to reducing credentialing timelines, and this is a key component of that, and following through and keeping the door open.
Yeah, this hits pretty close to home. So I think it goes back to, for me, it goes back to people are familiar with solutions that they've executed over and over again. And, I say this with tremendous amount of respect that we, in our environment, we're working with a legacy system with a tremendous amount of expertise that's been built up over many, many years. And the interactions between the multiple federal and state programs, they are convoluted, they are tough. And there's probably one or two people that actually know at the COBOL code level how that particular program is executed. And so when challenging times come about, it is more reliable. There's the false impression that is potentially more reliable to go back to an existing solution. And I'm guilty of that myself, having been in integrated eligibility 20 something years now. I am also guilty to that same fixation. And so it takes an openness to myself too, included, an openness to new solutions to be able to solve those types of problems, which for me also means going back to starting at the problem we want to solve, us agreeing together. This is the problem we want to solve. Now let's open ourselves to solutions that you may be familiar with, solutions that we're all learning about for the first time, which brings me kind of a second point in terms of partnership, which has been very, very helpful for us. In terms of partners, vendor partners who've been able to engage with us, not at the high level capability level, but really helping dig deep in terms of understanding the problem to be solved and really bringing their solution set to bear and really working with us to figure out, this is something that may not have been deployed in another state, in another municipality, but really addresses our business problem. And so that helps open kind of our stakeholders' eyes, but then, our eyes internally in terms of what's possible, even to the point of, is this something that we may be able to do something faster than we originally thought we'd be able to do?
Great. Well, with that, how about a round of applause for the panel? Thank you. And thank you for attending the IT Forum and this panel in particular.